Vital to the communities which they serve are the thousands of miles of highways, constructed and improved by the Works program. The need for first-class highways grows constantly as the automobile and the motor truck become increasingly important in both city and rural commerce. In many regions, great loss has befallen farmers and other rural residents during periods of bad weather which made secondary roads impassable. The need for adequate farm-to-market roads, which would make the transportation of farm produce independent of weather conditions, has been recognized in all parts of the country. But not until the beginning of the Works program was it possible to initiate a general plan for the development of farm-to-market roads. This plan brings immediate improvement in local business and property values wherever a secondary road is completed. At last, the farmer finds it possible to reach his market over well-constructed, weatherproof roads.
WPA stands for Works Projects Administration, and another time they changed the name to Works Progress Administration. So in a nutshell, it was part of FDR's New Deal during the 1930s to try to get the United States out of the Great Depression and put people to work. It ran from 1935 to 1943, put millions of people to work who were unemployed so that they could take care of themselves. A government-sponsored program, so it was our taxpayer dollars that were actually paying for it. It wasn't privately created jobs. It also put women to work, but because the mindset was that men were the primary breadwinners back then, it was aimed primarily at men. Only about 13.5% of the $11 billion that were involved in WPA went towards women.
That if you go to different places throughout different cities, for example in Providence, in East Providence, and maybe around here, you look down, you see these little bronze tags that are little placards, probably about 4 by 6 or then maybe, and they're all green now because they're originally copper color, and you can see that there were WPA projects with the year that the project was done. It has the U.S. Eagle on it.
It also put artists to work. It wasn't just people building sidewalks, building roads, bridges, etc. It was also artists, trying to get artists and writers to work as well. During its peak, it put 2 million people a year to work, and so certainly all the people who worked for the WPA who had previously been unemployed, there was no unemployment compensation back then, so they had no money coming into their house. It certainly helped all of those people. And in economics, there's something called the ripple effect. So if I have money, and now I go out to eat, well, now I'm helping the waitress and the cook and the guy who owns the restaurant, and then he might take the money, extra money he's making, and go out, and maybe the waitress will go out and over here. So these are ripple effects, and not only helps the people who got the money, but then it goes out and helps other people along the line as well.
Kind of makes me think of the Obama's Recovery Act, where the way I understand it, if you drive up Route 24 into Boston, you see Recovery Act. It's something about repairing the roads, although the road is pretty ruddy, so I don't know if it's working.
As of right now, based on what we're seeing, it's not doing anything. It has not helped. It should, besides increasing the national debt, it really has not seemed to really do its job as expected.
In terms of my class, when I teach U.S. history third semester, it's so that students can actually touch history instead of just hearing about it. What I do is I give them an assignment and I say, go in Warren or Bristol, and usually it's downtown Warren or Bristol, and I usually recommend a sidewalk, but as you've said, it's also a stone wall. But what I ask students to do is to go find one of these, which is usually embedded in a sidewalk built in the 1930s. On these plaques, this one says 1940, but this plaque says WPA 1935 to 1937. And so people were put to work building sidewalks, for instance, and then this plaque was embedded in the sidewalk in wet cement where it was supposed to stay in the sidewalk. Yep. Right? And that just indicated that that particular thing was built by the WPA. Now, what I asked students to do in the past is to go out and unfortunately get down on their knees and trace the WPA plaque. But I've had two students, and I don't remember their names honestly, and I wouldn't mention them if I did, but two students did not take jackhammers and jackhammer these out of the sidewalk. But what happened in Bristol, and I assume Warren too, this one says High Street right on it, but in Bristol what happens is they said those sidewalks from the 1930s are getting kind of old and they're deteriorating. And when they decided to replace the sidewalks, they had to make a decision. Do we keep the WPA plaques and put them in the new sidewalks? Or if they really weren't built, the new sidewalks weren't built by the WPA, then should we remove the plaques? And so apparently what they did is they removed the plaques, and two of my students somehow had access to these plaques. And they said, Mr. Burrow, instead of tracing the plaque, I'm going to burn the whole thing in for you.